Iowa state lawmakers are set to return to Springfield next week. One of the items potentially on their agenda is legislation aimed at giving parents the ability to know if their child is in danger on social media, known as Sammy's Law. It would require large social media companies to use third-party software companies to alert them if their child is getting cyberbullied.
We understand the need to protect privacy. We understand that social media can provide an important connection for kids. But we also need to make sure that parents have the ability to keep their children safe and have the choice to do so.
The House Consumer Protection Committee passed Sammy's Law out of committee earlier this month.